Today we study St. Louis de Montfort, and I realize some people may question that choice in our curriculum because Louis de Montfort is not like a heavy hitter with the likes of, say, St. Anselm or St. Augustine or Thomas Aquinas, Bonaventure, St. John of the Cross. He's a lesser known saint and more recent, but in my own life he's had a profound impact also in the life of the church in the last 100 years. And so I think it's really important for us in the New St. Thomas Institute to study St. Louis de Montfort primarily for his emphasis on the Incarnation and for his great contribution to the study of Mariology. So let's look at the life and theology of St. Louis de Montfort. St. Louis de Montfort was born in 1673. He was the oldest surviving child of 18 children born to Jean-Baptiste and Jean Grignon. In 1685, at the age of 12, he enters the Jesuit College of St. Thomas Becket, where his uncle was a parish priest. And the Jesuits imparted to him a deep devotion to his guardian angel and to the angels in general. I'd like to just point out here that in the last 3 lessons with Teresa of Avila, John of the Cross, and now St. Louis de Montfort, we find an early influence of the Jesuits on the formation of these great saints. At age 20, a benefactor paid for him to attend seminary in Paris, but due to insufficient funds, he could not live at the seminary, and so he had to live in boarding houses. He became ill during this time, and he even submitted himself to bloodletting for recovery. At age 22, his health did recover, and he was able to attend Little St. Sulpice and serve as its librarian while he attended seminary. And during this time, he dedicated himself to reading. He was a librarian after all. In particular, reading spirituality about the Blessed Virgin Mary, Mariology. In the year 1700, at the age of 27, St. Louis de Montfort was ordained as a priest, and he wanted to be appointed as a missionary, in particular as a missionary to Canada in the New World, but his request was rejected. And so instead, he joined the Third Order of St. Dominic to preach missions on the Rosary and to form Rosary confraternities known as the Company of Mary. Now, during a pilgrimage to Rome, he was able to meet with the Pope, and Pope Clement XI gave him the title of Apostolic Missionary. And then St. Louis made a retreat at Mont Saint-Michel to prepare himself for this new apostolic ministry. So this is a key moment in his life where a Pope actually commissions him, gives him the title Apostolic Missionary. He makes this retreat to the Archangel. Now, his preaching, which was very popular, was resisted by the Jansenists. And in a previous New St. Thomas Institute lesson, namely the one on predestination in our certificate in Catholic theology, we talk about Cornelius Jansenist and how he and his followers, the Jansenists, would appeal to St. Augustine for a very strong and austere form of Christianity that was based on predestination, total depravity and original sin, even limited atonement. And the Jansenists resisted the preaching of Louis de Montfort. In fact, he was even poisoned during this time. We don't know if the Jansenists did or someone else, but he did survive. Nevertheless, it did affect his health. Now, he wrote a number of works. He's perhaps best known for his book, True Devotion to Mary. This was written in 1712. However, it was lost until 1842. This is one reason why Louis de Montfort is not well known, even to this day, is because his primary work was lost for over 100 years. He also wrote The Secret of Mary, The Secret of the Rosary, and the Rules for the Company of Mary, and the Rule for the Daughters of Wisdom, a group for women. And having valued his subsidized education as a young man, he also gave himself to establishing schools for poor children, both young men and young women. And then at the age of only 43, in 1716, Louis de Montfort died after being a priest for only 16 years. So there's the short life, the short priesthood of Louis de Montfort, but let's look at the impact he made on the theological landscape of the 1700s. As I mentioned before, St. Louis de Montfort was in conflict with the Jansenists, and Cornelius Jansen died in 1638, and his followers, as I mentioned, were sort of like crypto-Protestants. They had a very pessimistic understanding of human nature. They believed in unconditional predestination, sometimes even double predestination, where God chooses, predestines before time, not based on any foreseen merits or faith, those who will go to heaven, those who will go to hell. The Jansenists came to believe in limited atonement, that Christ only died for the saved, not for all of humanity. And they, in a certain way, de-emphasized the humanity of Christ in favor of the divinity of Christ. They also de-emphasized the role of Mary and the role of saints. So you can see how the Jansenists sound a lot like Lutherans or even Calvinists. Now, the French response to the Jansenists arose as a new devotional love and practice for the humanity of Christ. This was expressed at this time in devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus, which symbolizes the love of God and the humanity of Jesus Christ, willing to die for all of humanity. Also, it expressed itself in a revival in Marian devotion. Again, the Blessed Mother helps us to understand the incarnation of Christ, that God humbled himself, the Son of God took on human nature to die for our sins. And St. Louis de Montfort is really at the center of this devotional response to the theological heresies of the Jansenists. St. Louis de Montfort focused his preaching on the incarnation of Christ, saying, quote, "It is through the most blessed Virgin Mary that Jesus Christ came into the world, and it is also through her that he will reign in the world." So this eternal decree by God and the historical act by God sets a pattern that cannot be undone. For Louis de Montfort, all things proceed and return to Christ through Mary. It's a devotional logic that cannot be contradicted by the hardened Jansenists. Louis actually bases his Mariology on the theology of Thomas Aquinas, which is beautiful. Another reason why I love St. Louis de Montfort so much. St. Louis de Montfort says this, quote, "St. Thomas Aquinas assures us that following the order established by divine wisdom, God ordinarily imparts his graces to men through Mary. Therefore, if we wish to go to him, seeking union with him, we must use the same means by which he used in coming down from heaven to assume our human nature and to impart his graces to us. That means was a complete dependence on Mary, his mother, which is true devotion to her," end quote. We see here that God has chosen to come to us through Mary. We must come to him through Mary. Again, it's a devotional logic that just gets hammered over and over by Louis de Montfort against the objections of the Jansenists. Also, he realized that your lay people, many of whom were illiterate, who would never study theology, had never read Thomas Aquinas during his time in France, even not even be able to read the Bible, they needed a way to enter into the mystery of the incarnation, into the life of Mary, into the life of Jesus. And he realized that the rosary given by Our Lady to St. Dominic was the means by which people would enter into the biblical story of Christ. As we learned from St. Ignatius of Loyola, into the scenery, into the landscape of the Gospels. And so he gave his life not only to preaching consecration to Jesus through Mary, total consecration, but also the practice of the rosary. He says, quote, "Never will anyone who says his rosary every day become a formal heretic or be led astray by the devil," end quote. He also says, quote, "When the Holy Rosary is said well, it gives Jesus and Mary more glory and is more meritorious than any other prayer." So powerful is the Holy Rosary. Here at the New St. Thomas Institute, we began on purpose. The very first day that the New St. Thomas Institute was founded was on the Feast of the Holy Rosary, October 7th. I did that on purpose because I realized, like St. Louis de Montfort, like St. John Paul II, like St. Dominic, the rosary is the greatest weapon against the devil. It's the greatest weapon for a new evangelization. Now, speaking of John Paul II, St. John Paul II said that his reading of True Devotion to Mary by St. Louis de Montfort had been a, quote, decisive turning point in his life, because he learned that devotion to Mary doesn't compete with devotion to Jesus. This is what Protestants don't understand. I think if you love Mary, you're taking away something from Jesus. No, rather we learn from St. Louis de Montfort, the deeper we go with Mary, the deeper we go with Jesus. John Paul II claimed to have read and reread True Devotion to Mary many, many times, even doing the 33-day consecration set forth by Louis de Montfort. And also John Paul II's motto, totus tuus, totally yours in Latin, is addressed to the Blessed Virgin Mary in response to the teaching of St. Louis de Montfort. John Paul II shows us that when we're totally dedicated to the Blessed Mother, we are even more totally dedicated to Jesus Christ. So what can we learn from St. Louis de Montfort? First of all, we see that loving the humanity of Jesus always entails a love for the Blessed Mother, because Christ assumed his human nature from Our Lady. We also see that the heresies of the Jansenists are overturned by this great devotion to Jesus through Mary. We also find that the Rosary is the greatest weapon and the most meritorious prayer that we can pray in giving glory to Jesus and Mary. And from John Paul II, we see that we can have a great global impact on the world by practicing total consecration to Our Lady. In the notes below this video, I've included a timeline of dates to encourage you to do the 33-day consecration to Jesus through Mary set down by Louis de Montfort. You can choose a Marian feast day that you'd like to finish on, and it'll calculate what day you need to begin the 33-day consecration so that you end on that special Marian feast day. I remember the first time that I did the 33-day consecration, on that last day, the day of consecration, I really did feel this sense of heaviness, this sense of dread, even this demonic weight or feeling around me. But when I prayed that final consecration, all of that darkness, all of those memories of sin, all that evil influence just vanished and went away, and I felt the love like I never had before of our Blessed Mother and her Son, Jesus Christ, in my life. So I think the 33-day consecration is something that we should all strive to do. I would encourage you, please make the 33-day consecration. And as St. Louis de Montfort says, pray that rosary every day. It's just as important as reading the Bible, studying theology, because the rosary, again, puts us into the scenery of the Gospels. St. Louis de Montfort, pray for us. God bless you. Thanks you for being in the New St. Thomas Institute, and do that 33-day consecration. Bye.